APS-C is dead, long live Super 35. And I actually mean that with all of my heart. Sony with this camera made a 180-degree turn and brought something back that should have actually been dead a long time ago. Yeah, okay, it has a new name and a shiny new body, and most of its internals are also new, but the soul of this camera still beats loud for old-time filmmakers that used to have and love a Super 35 sensor. I now had roughly 6 months of shooting every single video you've seen or not seen here on this channel, as well as a couple of professional productions on it. And I think it's finally time for me to give you my personal opinion on why actually this is the best thing that could have happened to APS-C and why this camera is almost the perfect camera for every beginner filmmaker as well as the professional user. All of this and a bit more will be talked about right after the intro. So I prepared roughly 15 points that in my opinion make this camera a fantastic tool, especially for indie filmmakers and people who only operate in smaller crews, or for people who want to get more high quality looking footage, such as content creators like myself. And I think that this is a good thing for you as a viewer. I'm not in the mood to talk much blah blah around the points, since 15 points are quite a lot to talk about anyways, so let's cut the crap and get into it. Let's actually begin with the most obvious thing the Sony FX30 offers that is already mentioned in the title and in my first paragraph, the Super 35 sensor. This is Sony's most advanced APS-C sensor in a new format, slightly larger than its previous models with 20.1 megapixels. It's a tiny beast of a sensor and capable of producing stunning images with downsampled 6K resolution, giving you the ability to shoot 4K in 120 frames and up to 240 frames per second in HD. And it has up to 14 stops of dynamic range. This to me is just mind-blowing, how Sony achieved to cram all of the same specs of the FX3 into this tiny sensor and make it still look this good. Oh, and while we are talking about specs, maybe I should also mention that you get very good, very excellent color reproduction in 10-bit 4:2 internally from the Super 35 sensor and 16-bit RAW externally through HDMI recording. And if that is actually not enough for you, let's just drop a small and mostly insignificant fact in that maybe changes your mind. The FX30 is actually Netflix approved. So if you like, go shoot a movie with it and try selling it to Netflix. So much for the "it's not a real cinema camera" crowd. And then as the second point, and this is nothing that should sway you into the wide open arms of Sony, but it actually did it a bit for me, because I'm a sucker for fantastic design. The camera body itself. It's the same cinema line grey outer shell body design as all of their higher end models, with the exception, well, it is actually the same body as the FX3. This, in my opinion, is a very good thing, because the FX3 is gorgeous. It is a very functional, very cleverly designed body with a lot of mounting points for accessories all around its shell, 3 to be precise. The form factor is perfect for travel, but it still has the looks of a professional cinema camera in a tinier body. And if you're like me and want to add even more things, there are plenty of options already on the market by small rig, tilter, wooden camera and more for the FX3. And all of them actually fit perfectly for the FX30. The third point on my list, and I don't even have to talk about it much, the fantastic autofocus that Sony has on its cameras that makes life as a single operator and shooter so much easier. Next up, this was actually it. Next up, let's talk about Cine EI and its dual native ISOs of 800 and 2500. These two ISO values are the base values of the camera, with the least noise capture and the most dynamic range possible. And to make it very easy to understand, Cine EI can be understood as just, well, a pair of Luts slapped over your footage to see if you correctly expose your image. The camera itself will always record in its native settings, so correcting the image through your EI settings with lowering or raising your values on screen gives you an overexposed footage for the post-processing. And as you might know and maybe heard, Sony's footage has to be slightly overexposed to make it look clean and better in post. It sounds complicated, but in the end you get much cleaner shadows in post and a better image in the end. This is the same log workflow that is also on Sony's bigger FX lineup cameras, and getting this on the smallest one as well is fantastic. Point number 4, let's get into frame rates a bit more. 4K 120. Okay, yeah, you need a very fast SD card or a CF Express Type A card for that. But it looks damn cool. And 240 FPS HD is even cooler. Look at that. Still, I mostly shoot 4K 60 because for my taste it's actually enough slow motion, and investing into the Type A CFast card with an okayish amount of gigabytes is unbelievably expensive, even for someone making money with the camera. Number 5. Custom Luts. Finally, you're able to see directly when shooting your footage what it can actually look like when you've added your LUTs. Custom LUTs are a thing I already really enjoyed on the Pocket 4K, and now that it is on the FX30, it's even better. I have about 2 to 3 of my custom LUTs always on my camera to make it easy to see what it would look like when it's graded. If you don't know how to actually get them onto your FX30, here's actually how to do it. First, insert your SD card into your computer. Second, go into the private folder, go to Sony, go to the Pro folder. If there is none, create a Pro folder, then create a LUT folder. Third, drop the LUTs you like into this folder. 4, put your SD card back into the camera and then go to Menu, Category 5 and select LUT. Number 6, find an empty user spot, then go to Import, then the slot your SD card is in, and then import the LUT you like. Voila, you can now watch back your scene with the LUT you've chosen. It's a small feature, but it's a really great small feature when you always use the same LUT for certain shots or scenes. In my case, exactly for these A-roll shots of the YouTube videos, I'm always using the same LUT. Speaking of smaller features, I really like the tally lights and the front recording button that Sony integrated on the FX30, as well as the red recording square around the monitor. The front recording button isn't that much in use with my kinds of setups, I'm not that vloggy guy, but I sometimes push the button so that it actually doesn't feel that lonely. But the better feature are the tally lights and the red recording square around the menus, lighting up and showing you that you are recording. It's a simple thing, even simpler than the one before, but it helped me more than once in not doing my A-roll for 10 to 20 minutes and then realizing I forgot to hit the recording button. A simple but very time-saving feature, and if someone else instead of you is actually in front of the camera, it shows them that recording has started as well. I really want this feature on all of my future cameras. Speaking of features I want in all of my future cameras, Gyro Data Stabilization is another one of those small things that are fantastic when you actually get used to it. Sony implemented the Gyro Stabilization into Catalyst Browse late in 2022, and since then almost all of the cameras can actually use it. The FX30 works great with it, and since then if there are handheld shots that are rough, I tend to throw them into Catalyst Browse for stabilization. The only problem right now, since Sony's FX30 Update 2.0 and Catalyst Browse, well, somehow it's broken and won't work. So no way for me to show you the feature itself. But believe me, it works the same way as in my ZV-10 review, a small crop in and a very stable image, and with a bit of render times until it is stable. Next point, raw output through HDMI. Oh yeah, okay, you need a monitor who can actually record raw video through HDMI. Like the Atomos Ninja V, and you need an SSD for that as well. But the files coming out of this combo, and if you think about it, possibility to actually do that with the smallest cinema line camera from Sony, this is also fantastic. You can get 16-bit RAW files that are compressed into a 12-bit ProRes RAW in 4.7K, 60 frames per second. That is quite a lot of data and words from this combo, which makes color grading and VFX work so much easier and actually a breeze. I mostly use it for color heavy tasks where I know beforehand that I need to do some heavy grading or some VFX keying or even more. And let's actually not forget another thing when talking about the FX30, and which plays into the point before. It sports a full-size HDMI port, which is also something I don't want to miss anymore on my future camera. But this will probably be an SDI port in the future anyways. And if you don't use the RAW through HDMI option, you can still get, as said before, fantastic 10-bit 4:2 ProRes through the camera in 4K resolution, which is also still a breeze to grade as well and much better than 8-bit, and it gives you plenty of options to manipulate it in post afterwards. Most of my talking head and B-roll shots are shot in this format, and I had no problems with it whatsoever. Great codec coming from a great sensor, Super 35. What we actually haven't talked about is the sound thingy you can record with the FX30. Yes, there is the option to get Sony's XLR top handle unit for the camera, either directly with the camera or as a separate accessory, which allows you to get direct XLR mic inputs into it. Sure, absolutely, it's great and all, but the cheapest I found the handle for in Germany is 750 euros. And let's be honest, that's ridiculous. And a definitive no from me. Yeah, it's a hot shoe enabled top handle mic combo, which is great and all, but let's be honest, you can also use an external recorder with XLR capabilities and then sync in post for probably half the price with a great mic already in the budget. Or if you're a content creator, you can get a Sony microphone with a hot shoe connection like the small Sony ECM GZ1M, the name, for roughly 80 euros, and you have a great sound as well. I got it for, I think, 134 years ago, and it's still great. When we're talking about money, the pricing of this camera is also a plus point in my opinion. The quality you can get from the right body and lens combination with a bit of lighting knowledge is really good, especially for paying under $2,000 or a bit over 2,000 euros. I actually saw it for 1,890 yesterday for the camera body itself. This is half of what I was actually willing to spend on my next camera, which was originally the FX30. But since then I also added a new monitor to it, the Atomos Ninja 5, a lens and a bit of grip to my arsenal for the same price of one single FX3, and I must say I'm really impressed with what I got for the amount of money I've spent. A very good, very well-rounded package for almost all situations that I can make money with, being it commercials, YouTube, professional smaller sets, and even more. In my opinion, this money was well spent, and the return on investment is great as well. Now when it comes to choice, a definitive consideration to make is availability and also variety of lens choices in your future ecosystem. And to be honest, Sony has made quite an effort over the last couple of years to get their lenses, as well as a lot of other manufacturers, on board with the E-mount system. Being it either full frame or APS-C lenses. Manufacturers such as Sigma, Zeiss, Tamron, Viltrox, Samyang, to name a few in the full frame range, or in the APS-C, no matter what. And then also the Cine lens manufacturers such as SLR Magic, IRIX, 7 Artisan, DCO Films, just to name another few. There are probably 100 more. There's a whole lot of effort to give you all the choices you need for your cinematic shooting options, and this is one of those points that actually swayed me to the Sony camp. I now actually own 5 Sony E-mount lenses, and I don't think this will get less in the upcoming years, probably double of that what I have right now. Every focal length, T or f-stop you can think of, there is something for you in the E-mount range. Now let's actually get to the last 2 points on my list, which is actually the newest thing that Sony added into the camera coming from this review a couple of days ago, namely in April of 23, the update to version 2.0. This has been handled in a previous video on this channel already, so I will only give you a short overview of it. If you want to watch it, you can actually watch it. First, you now have the ability to shoot in 4K DCI mode, which gives you a bit more real estate on the top end to have a bit more flexibility in post afterwards, cropping, scaling, moving the image. I really like this, and of course all my future projects will be shot in this mode. And second, you can now de-squeeze anamorphic lenses directly on the camera monitor, namely 2x or 1.3x. Great for users of anamorphic lenses that don't have or don't want to use an external monitor. But be warned, you still need to de-squeeze the image in post anyway, so it's just a reference tool instead of a de-squeeze tool per se. And now to the last point on my list, a speed round that I actually like speed round since the ZV-10 review of all the features and parts that I actually haven't talked about yet. So you are in a rush and don't want to grade your footage in post, but want to get really nice pictures without much hassle? A Cinetone is the thing for you. Sony's one-stop cinematic look profile for accurate skin tones and color. What about S-Log3 instead, which gives you the ability to unlock all of the FX30's 14 stops of dynamic range, and therefore the confidence and power to grade beautifully in post, the way you want it actually to be graded. Maybe you are more of a shooter who is on the go more often, so the active stabilization mode with its 5-axis image stabilization for handheld shooting is something that makes you consider not buying a gimbal, because it's actually pretty good with a slight crop in. Maybe focus breathing compensation with compatible lenses is more of your thing, giving you footage the looks of a much more expensive lens without actually being much more expensive. What about the ability to get a camera with this much power, flexibility and color accuracy anywhere on almost any gimbal, any drone or other devices of your choice, because it actually only weighs 646 grams without a lens? That's actually not much. What about a long shooting performance on a single battery of up to 110 minutes or even more when attaching a V-mount battery to it? You know what? I haven't mentioned the very well overhauled menu yet. It's actually much cleaner. Everything related to shooting is organized in a logical manner now, and after a couple of days it becomes second nature. Yeah, it's still not the best, but it's much better than the previous versions. Oh, you're out there somewhere for a longer period of time and you have no way to empty your SD card because you're in the wilderness. Well, great that you can actually pack 2 of them into the FX30 and record double the amount of footage at the same time. There's also a touch monitor that can actually rotate and swivel, and it's actually quite usable now. So after all of this, maybe you see it the same way as I do. The Sony FX30 is a fantastic Super 35 camera in a full frame body with the best lens variety to choose from, with all of the features you could long for an actually affordable price point. It is not only there for content creators or beginners, but also for content creators and professionals longing to either have this as their primary camera or adding this to their already existing A camera as a second one on set. I for once would like to add this as the last famous words in this review, even though I think APS-C is dead. Long live the new king, Super 35. As always, my name is LeechTM, off writing the next scripts. If you enjoyed this video, then make sure to subscribe to this channel. There are plenty more of this type of content and of course many other things available for you to watch. Have a great day, see you around, and goodbye.